How to assess the right level of technology for your story. First of all, shout out to Titus Constantine for requesting this topic. If you have any requests for videos, feel free to write them down in the comments. When writing fantasy, or more so science fiction stories, assessing the right level of technological advancement is often fairly tricky and comes with a couple of pitfalls you should avoid. The simplest of which being, make sure the technology fits your story. If you write a story about interstellar travel set in the future, for example, then of course the protagonists of your story need to be able to use some sort of technology to travel from one planet to the next through space. How tedious and time-consuming or fast and easy this should be is entirely up to you. Do you want to show the struggles of space travel, or does that play more of a secondary role in your story and the adventures on each planet are the main focus, like Futurama for example? One pitfall you need to avoid here is implementing technological advancements that supersede the level of technology required to make your story believable, because this will lead to technological inconsistencies. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Simple. If you are writing a story about, for example, a group of miners leaving Earth to find an asteroid or any sort of other celestial body to mine a new resource, and one of your main plot points is how they traverse asteroid fields in their mining ship, barely escaping mortal collisions, then it wouldn't make sense for that world to have invented something like the portal gun from Rick and Morty. The reader or viewer would read or watch your story and constantly ask themselves why the crew didn't simply just create a portal to the asteroid where they were heading to in the first place. An example of this that really grinds my gears is Star Wars: The Last Jedi, when Admiral Holdo uses her ship's hyperdrive to ram through a First Order ship. I mean, I get that you can't apply physics to a fantasy or sci-fi story as we know it. If you did that, then privatized space travel would never happen, because any spaceship could basically destroy an entire planet's city if it decided to ram that city from outer space. I get that. I don't have a problem with that. But by writing a scene like the hyperspace ramming scene, the writers of The Last Jedi crashed into a pitfall headfirst and created an unnecessary technological plot hole simply because it looks cool on screen. I mean, why sacrifice dozens of fighter pilots to take down the Death Star if you could have just rammed it with an uncrewed ship in hyperdrive? And yes, you could say the Death Star would have just shot them down when they approached, or that hyperdrives are expensive and the Rebel Alliance didn't have the funds, but I mean really, use multiple ships, the Death Star would not have been able to shoot all of them down, and money-wise, surely that would have still been cheaper than sacrificing all of the human and non-human lives and their fighter jets. These kind of mistakes in technological consistency within your story only lead to you frustrating your audience. And believe me, I am, or rather I was, a huge Star Wars fan all throughout my childhood. And I so would have loved to have seen the plot of the Yuuzhan Vong come to the big screen, or Kyle Katarn. How awesome would that have been? But now I am listing Star Wars as a negative example in one of my videos. And unfortunately, this will happen more often. Such as an example for another pitfall: inconsistency in technological advancements. When you write a longer story with technological advancements in it, make sure that you stick by these. The Rise of Skywalker, for example, exposes us to Treadspeeders, speeders with tracks that officially give the rider better traction on uneven terrain. To the viewer, these speeders might look cool, however, they should have no place at all in a civilization that has already invented and used regular hovering speeders en masse some 30-odd years ago. I mean, how much more uneven can a terrain get than the woodlands of Endor in Return of the Jedi? Why on earth did the writers of The Rise of Skywalker think it was a good idea to introduce us to Treadspeeders? Well, I guess if you use phrases like "somehow Palpatine returned." Anyway, if you want to introduce inferior technology to the one you have already established in your story, make sure to give your audience a reason for said technological step backwards. I mean, they do occur in real life as well. Just look at the manufacturing of glass, for example. The ancient Egyptians were known for creating glass vases. However, that technology was lost over time and only reoccurred in Europe after the Dark Ages. So to make sure such a step backwards is plausible in your story, be sure to include something like a war or a natural disaster, for example, in which everyone who knew how to make a certain technology dies and/or the written texts on how to manufacture said technology perishes. To make the technology in your story believable for your audience, it does not need to be realistic. It only needs to be plausible. A great example for this are the transporters in Star Trek that allow individuals to be dematerialized to then be beamed to a different location. According to the laws of physics in our world, this would mean that an individual would be killed and then cloned at a different location, resulting in the death of and recreation of an individual over and over again. However, the transporters fit the narrative in Star Trek and are plausible to the audience. By the way, Japanese-American physicist Michio Kaku has a really cool series on sci-fi technology and how feasible it is for our world. You should really check that out if you want to see more on this topic. Another technology that fits its story perfectly, but is not realistic in the classical sense, are the Babelfish in A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Small yellow fish that are placed in a person's ear and that can translate any language whatsoever into that individual's first language. It perfectly fits the story and allows Douglas Adams to circumvent having to create multiple languages to the same extent as Tolkien did with Elvish or Dwarvish, for example. Throwing no shade at Douglas Adams here, by the way. I really enjoy A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm merely stating that Tolkien and languages, especially when it comes to creating depths for languages, is just something else. If you are looking for the right level of technology for your story, you can also always draw inspiration from either human inventions from the past or what physicists predict will be possible in the future, and then simply put your own little twist on those technologies. George R.R. Martin did this with Wildfire, for example. His green liquid fire in A Song of Ice and Fire is basically Greek fire, a napalm-like substance which the Greeks used to fight off the Byzantine Empire. Just like Wildfire, it was also capable of floating on water and causing severe devastation to enemy ships. Or if you are planning a story set in the future and you are unsure of how to create plausible space travel, then look no further than space elevators or skyhooks that can be used for spacecraft to land and take off. Or solar sails that use the radiation pressure exerted by the sun to propel a spacecraft forwards, just like sails of old ships from some 500 years ago did with the wind. Ultimately, you as a writer can freely decide which level of technology you can use for your story. Just make sure that it fits your story's narrative and that you stay consistent with it. Avoid the Star Wars pitfall. Make sure your technology is plausible to your audience. Steps backwards in the technology of your story are perfectly fine as long as you give a plausible explanation for them. Plausibility for your audience is the key learning you can take from this video. If you do that, then anything is possible. Look at gnomish engineering in World of Warcraft, for example. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe for more, and if you have any requests for topics, let me know in the comments.